Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning back into the Dark Arts Coffee YouTube channel. I'm one of your hosts, Brad.
I'm Jamie.
And today we've got a guest who's come down all the way from
Bath.
Maxwell Dashwood Colonna.
Wrong, but
Maxwell
close.
Colonna-Dashwood.
You got it.
From the really well-known coffee company, Colonna. We're going to have a little chat, see what he's been up to. Yeah, roll intro. Every time. We
don't need to wait for it.
Yeah, I know. I feel like in my head like I do though. Isn't that the best intro ever made for any show, ever?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Maxwell,
Yes.
how you doing today?
I'm good, yeah. It's
good?
good to be here, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me onto your show.
Thank you for coming. Now, for obviously anyone out there who is not aware of who you are or Colonna as a company,
Yeah.
what's Colonna?
We kind of do a bunch of things in coffee. What you now know as Colonna is a coffee roastery based near Bristol. But it didn't start as our journey wasn't started as a coffee roastery. It was a shop originally in Bath, which is still going, Colonna and Smalls. That's about 11 years old now.
11 years. And was that your first foray into the coffee world? Or were you involved a little bit?
No, so I've got the cliche bit of my story is the going to work in Melbourne for a year and getting into coffee. I had no interest in coffee previously, but I really loved hospitality. And the first sort of real vocation or job I had was I was a portrait artist.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, and my father's a sculptor, and I'd always done loads of art. But actually, it's kind of really art is really solitary. You spend loads of time on your own.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like if you're going to be an artist, you have to be driven. You have to believe that's what you should do, which I just didn't. I was kind of like, oh, I guess I could paint some stuff and draw some stuff.
Something needs to keep the fire burning when you're all alone for days on end.
Yeah. Anyway, like a typical struggling artist, I worked in a bar, and I much preferred the bar work. I didn't really realise that until I actually got quite busy with the artwork. I had to stop doing the bar work.
Oh, wow.
I was just like, oh, this sucks. I don't enjoy this at all. And I was like, I found hospitality way more interesting, the way people interact in a space or with a product or whatever. So I didn't have any idea about what I wanted to do in hospitality, but I like food and drink. And I met my wife, Leslie. She used to ride her horse to the country pub, tie it up outside and have 3 pints of Foster's. And then get back on the horse in the middle of the day. I was like, yes. So we got married and did 6 months in India. That was just the roll of a dice. Still no coffee. And then we only had the work visa in Australia because I'd already worked on vineyards in New Zealand. So the first vineyard we got a job on was Oyster Bay. Do you know Oyster Bay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's quite a famous New Zealand.
Yeah.
Like, they do the Chardonnay.
That's it. Pretty big. And you basically got paid by the vine.
Yeah.
And
you can get it at the corner shop.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So
it's everywhere.
Super sort of successful, but reasonably commercial. And it was really hard. Hardest work I've ever done.
Yeah.
It was in the middle of winter we arrived, so you had to prune the whole vine, rip everything out, retie it, and you got like 20 cents for one.
Wow.
But because I'm a highly competitive person, I saw this guy next to me. He was just really fast. I was like, I'm going to get as fast as you.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, got quite good at it. Then got offered a job on a smaller vineyard by like a team, and that was paid by the hour, right? And it was about doing a better job. And after like the first week, the guy, a Brazilian guy who was sort of running that group, pulled me to one side and he was like, his name was Junior, and he was like, Maxwell, if you keep going like this, we're going to have to let you go. We're going to have to sack you.
Because you're doing too good of a job?
You're too fast. We've got this amount of time to do this work. You just need to slow down.
Yeah, and if the bosses catch wind of how good you are, we're all fucked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So worked in New Zealand for 6 months. Then came back to the UK, ended up going via India to Australia, and ended up in Melbourne with a work visa. Got a job in the CBD in a conference centre that does polling. And it was not a specialty coffee place. I think the reason people get into coffee in Melbourne is because you can't work serving customers and not talk about it. They talk to you about it, the customers. They
About coffee?
Yeah, they're just not.
Yeah.
They don't talk to you about single origin. They just tell you how they want it, and it's a very particular customer base.
So in this polling centre, you were working in a
coffee.
cafe
Yeah.
in a polling centre.
Cafe conference centre. So you they would have all sorts of interesting events, and the cafe would sort of have a bar in the evening on that Thursday, Friday.
Okay,
It was
cool.
cool. It was like super interesting place. They gave me a hard time in the cafe because I couldn't do latte art. And when I first had to make coffee, I was like, oh, latte art's a pain. This is hard. I was frustrated by how hard it was. And then I started talking to some of the regulars who were a bit more into coffee, and I'd been there like not a long time, and one of the regulars said, you should go up the road to a place called Brother Baba Boudin on Little Burke Street. If anyone knows about that cafe, at the time it was owned by like what people call one of the sort of fathers of coffee in Melbourne, a guy called Mark Dundon. So I went up there on my lunch break. They were like, you go there and see what it's all about. And there was actually a woman serving coffee with a coffee tattoo up her leg who was, I think without her serving me, I might not have got into it. Because a lot of the other places I went, they didn't speak to you. Just like, do you want a coffee? Yep. But I showed a bit of interest, and she was like, oh, we've got this other coffee, like an under-the-counter coffee, a Kenyan coffee.
Yeah.
And she was like, it tastes, it's the first time I heard flavour notes. And she was like, oh, it tastes, I think it was strawberry. Did she say vanilla or something else? And I honestly, at the time, because I've been trying to get into whiskey, right?
Okay, yeah.
But to me, I just couldn't do it. I was like, whiskey's just all like fire. I can get like PT or non-PT, but I couldn't really get into tasting whiskey. And so what shocked me about the coffee, and maybe it's just, everyone's different, I just got what she was, I was like, wow. Not only do I get what you're saying, but I really like it. And I was kind of shocked I'd never had it before.
Yeah.
That woman is Taylor Brown, who now runs
Tailor-made.
Tailor-Made in Norway. She was the first one.
Wasn't it a similar? It's exactly what Nick said.
Nick had a similar story where.
Did he?
Taylor,
He fucking took that.
Like literally the
That's
same.
my story. Suddenly I asked myself the question, I was like, why did I have to come all the way around the world, speak to a regular in a cafe and get sent to an unmarked cafe? Because in Melbourne that was like a good
thing.
cafe. They were the messaging for the customers really like, there's no name out the front, you have to know what to look for.
There's something cool about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you need enough knowledge and education in the customer base for that to work, right?
Yeah.
So I'll get to that in a bit. It didn't work in Bath. Yeah, basically, I quit my job next day, got a job as a barista full time, 5 days a week in the CBD, and then spent our weekends going on every barista course, visiting every roaster we could. We're here for a year. Let's learn as much as we can about coffee.
Yeah, wow.
You could see coffee was at a time.
Yeah.
It had so much that was obviously interesting that I just straight away was like, there's lots that isn't being explored here.
Yeah.
And there's this amazing thing. I grew up on the south coast of the New Forest. So we went back there and started an events company and basically built a coffee bar to go to music festivals.
Why did you want to do the event as like a starting point? Was that purely a financial sort of thing? It would be sort of cheaper to set up a stall and then try to do that, or just trying to figure out why you wouldn't just go for bricks and mortar straight off the bat?
Yeah, no. Partly didn't feel qualified.
Okay.
If you look at the speed at which we did things, I often wanted to learn everything about something before I dived into it. Obviously, then you realise you won't learn everything about it, but you feel like you've learnt enough.
Completely opposite to me and you, Jamie?
So anyway, we did that for like a year, and it was actually, I remember the time, it was cool. It was a great experience, but I remember we were at a dance festival called Global Gathering, and it was 6 a.m. and we'd gone all night, sold a lot of coffee, and this dude just came onto the stall, and he was he just raided all of our sugar to try and sort of balance himself out. And I just remember thinking, this is the ideal environment to sort of explore the narrative of specialty coffee.
I quite enjoy working festivals, but yeah, it's not. I like building the bar, and then having 3 days of drinking really early and making coffee for people who are really excited because they're at an event.
Actually,
you get to talk to them.
working
That bit's
them.
really fun.
That lasted a year, and we said, okay, we want to create a destination cafe or store. And we looked around the UK just to find somewhere we thought might be right. Considering how good it's been in Bath, it's very easy now to tell the story of how that was all very carefully considered, and we looked at the demographic. And Bath, the two main landlords in Bath are the council and a charity called St John's Hospital, who've been going since 1178.
Wow, oh wow.
Incredible, right? And they've been given most of the property in wills.
Wow.
But they manage it a bit like, Borough Market and stuff. It's not the highest rent. They want to choose and create.
That's nice, though.
It is nice. And we managed to get in this amazing little shop with 5 seats, got a flat above it, all for hardly any money. And I think they didn't expect us to do well. And actually, some of the first customers who came in who were like, oh, Bath doesn't need another coffee shop. They're still coming in today. And we've been there, it'll be 11 years in a couple of months.
That's amazing. So, but like to sort of progress past that point.
No, let's stay there.
Let's just keep talking about your coffee shop. Like you obviously then you've done so much more since then.
Well, the thing is, this is the question about barista competitions, which I think it's fair to say they're probably not as influential as big as they were. I don't know if everyone agrees with that. But there was a time where, because there wasn't the scene, they were the scene, and they were the place you had the conversations about asking questions. And because at the same time I'm fascinated by hospitality and engaging customers, I'm trying to make the best possible product for customers. And a lot of the questions about the research I've done in coffee isn't about the minutiae of coffee. I'm always interested in the biggest impact stuff.
Yeah.
So if you go all the way down.
I don't buy this. You already said you're highly competitive. You're just learning so you can win competitions. That's what you already said it about the.
Yeah, you said it before.
He opened a coffee shop in a place where there was like no one doing the same thing, so you could obviously be invested there.
Yeah,
easy, done.
Yeah.
And now you're getting into competition baristering. So that's obviously that's what you did after opening the shop.
Or did the roastery happen first?
No, the competitions were way before the roastery. So first of all, I was like, okay, sourcing green coffee and roasting looks kind of challenging. I'll use other people's first and learn from them. And the reason I did the competition was actually, I think if you're going to, people do respond to like credentials, or we had this cafe and people are like, why should I listen to you? And you're like,
yeah,
well, you don't have to, you can go somewhere else. But actually there was a couple of reasons for the comps. I was like, I thought it would be good for the business if we could show that we knew what we were talking about.
There definitely was a time where you kind of needed it, right?
Right. But I also was genuinely, when I was in Melbourne, and most of the courses I went on honestly were rubbish.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a particularly curious person to be like, this doesn't work, this 25 mil, 25 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And that led me to a guy called David Makin, who had just come second in the world. He was the Australian barista champion at the time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a course at all. It was a conversation for 3 hours with a whiteboard where he had acknowledged that a lot of what you get taught in a training session is a dumbed down, we've got to teach them something, let's teach them this. When suddenly the sort of coffee scene grew and everyone was experimenting, that's cool, right? But from my hospitality side, I'd walk into a shop and I'd be like, can I have an espresso? And they'd be like, yeah. And then they'd come over to me and go, yeah, we're trying this new way of making it today. It doesn't really taste very good. And I'm like, I just paid £3 for this. Like, serve me the one that you know tastes pretty good. Experiment by all means, and then, basic product development, right? Now we think it's good enough, now let's serve it to customers. But anyway, David Makin, who had the biggest impact on me in Melbourne, had just done a lot of comp, and it seemed that competition was a place to innovate and research, and just seemed like there was a lot happening there. And I went back in the UK, I went to the 2010 championships in London, and the competitive side of me was like, ooh. I remember watching Michael Phillips, who was amazing on stage, and it seemed really hard, and I like a challenge, so I started taking part. Took it really seriously, did my first competed in 2011, won my Southwest heat, and then dropped a signature drink on a judge in the final.
Nice.
Still got 5th though, right? If you came 6th, and you're like, I came 6th to the guy. And then 2012, I won the UK. And at that time, I was just wanted to, that was amazing. And then got to go to the Worlds in Vienna. The Worlds are interesting. If you can get through the Worlds to a reasonably high place, suddenly you meet all sorts of people and you get a bit of a platform and you can start to collaborate with even more people.
Yeah.
And so it was then after that I realised that, I started making barista competitions about a platform to engage people around ideas rather than just a score sheet to win.
Okay.
So is that why when you did the water one, were you like, I'm going to do one about water so that I can then write a book?
Yeah, it was all planned out. No, but you're right. not about the book bit. I wrote the book because we were annoyed that nobody read the paper properly. What happened there was 2013, I lost to John Gordon, right? And I was making a point about how grinders were rubbish and that I was weighing, but you get penalised for waste coffee. So I scored first on sensory, but got pushed into second because of the technical, which I'd done on purpose. 2014, I did the water research. So Chris he was doing his postdoctorate in chemistry at Bath, and he would come into the cafe as a customer. And we were a multi-roaster still. So we opened that shop 11 years ago. We've only been roasting 5. So for 6 years, I used other people's coffee. One of the coffees that I tasted in London that tasted great didn't taste good in the cafe in Bath. And no one, as roasters, I'm sure you hate it when some cafe owner or a barista goes, something wrong with the coffee. But I tried everything. I looked at all the variables, and then they said, send me a sample back. So I sent them a sample back. This was actually Square Mile. And Jess was the head roaster at the time. And she did a bunch of tests, and she was like, tastes great here. Now, it's easy, I think, because of all the variables in coffee, to go, for both of us, just to think the other one's wrong, right?
Yeah.
That we just got different taste. I think it tastes good, you don't, or whatever. But actually, I tasted lots of coffee with them, and I was like, no, it tastes really bad in the cafe.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm sure if Jess was here, she'd agree with me, right? And so that's when I got interested in water. So when Chris came in one morning, I just pulled him to one side. I said, hey, Chris, I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. This TDS meter, what do you think about that? And he looked it up on Google, and he was like, well, it's just a conductivity meter. So it doesn't tell you anything about what's in the water. It just tells you there's some stuff in there.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, yeah. So the coffee industry uses this meter as the way to measure water. What do you think about that? And he laughed. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah. So then I took him through the story. He said, okay, give me some water. And, all the roasteries were super collaborative. They were like, okay, here's a sample of our water. And we took it up to the university. And Chris, how we did this, I don't know. Normally you'd have to get funding for this. Yeah. He just went into the university. He's very charming and just used the equipment. And very quickly, as we studied it more and more, he was like, I think there's an academic paper here, like easily. Like, there's some definite things we can look at. And then that paper was published before I did the Barista Comp, which was published in an American journal, in the Journal of Agriculture and Food Science. The title is the impact of cations on coffee extraction.
Impact of what?
Cations, so basically like in water you always have a mixture of both, anions and cations. Ions is basically the mineral. So a cation is like calcium or magnesium.
Right.
Yeah. So this paper basically just said calcium and magnesium seem to bind more strongly to coffee molecules. That's all it said. And so the bigger part for me was, if that was the case, then hard water should pull more flavour out, right? But anyone who lives in a hard water area is like, well, the coffee just tastes flat and rubbish. So I was like, okay, even though theoretically that paper got published and it makes sense, something else was happening. And that's when it's basically all the bicarbonate of the water, so the alkalinity, which its job is to control acidity.
Right. Yeah.
So any hard water area's got a ton of bicarb, nearly always. Coffee's an acidic beverage, about a pH of 5 for specialty. So you're trying to make a bright acidic beverage, but you've got all this bicarbonate that just goes. So I went to Rimini, and I knew the judges wouldn't like it. I knew they'd be like, it's too complicated. Why don't you just make us a nice coffee and talk about where it's from? And I was like, no, but I think this is really important. And after the feedback from, it's always hard with barista competitions. Depends which judge you speak to on what the feedback is. One of them's like, loved it. Another one's like, I just thought it was too complicated or whatever. Anyway, you can see I'm great with feedback. So I went, so I was like, okay, I'm going to ham it up. And I had a lab coat and everything. Yeah. And I thought, let's try and make it fun. Got through to the World Finals, came 5th, which I was massively bummed about. But for my coffee career, I reckon that single most competition was the biggest thing I could have done. That had the biggest impact.
Because of the
water,
the water and the
it just got people excited. Everyone who was there, and then it was on blogs, and it's a genuine innovation. And I kind of still feel crazy about it. I'm like, water's been around forever. Why were we able to come along and research this in a way that other people hadn't? Like, we haven't done anything new with water. We just studied it a bit more.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's about communication, right? So I think water's difficult to understand. It all looks the same. It's all just see-through. Whereas grinding, you're like, oh, okay, fine grind, coarse grind. So water was always the elephant in the room because people knew it was complicated, but it was hard to tackle.
Yeah.
So I was like, how can we tackle this in a way that's practical, right? And that's where I found myself increasingly in my coffee career is I understand coffee and customers, but then working with somebody who's probably a scientist or an inventor and sort of bringing the two together.
Yeah.
We decided we needed to write the book
Okay.
because
And what's the book called?
Water for Coffee.
Water for Coffee.
Yep. Colonna and Smalls, Water for Coffee.
We'll put a link in the bio for anyone who's interested in reading about water.
It's out of print, you can't buy it anymore.
Really?
Yeah, because we learned so much that we wanted to do an edition 2 that we felt was more accurate.
Okay.
We're currently just in talks with the publisher to do that. So,
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
so yeah, that was the idea behind Colonna. That was 2015, and then I got interested in pods. There was actually 2 reasons I was interested in pods. First of all, was the customer who's buying them is probably not what even myself or most people I spoke to in third wave or specialty coffee thought they were. We just assumed they were people who didn't care about coffee,
Yeah.
which is wrong. I actually believe that Nespresso is the best premium brand for coffee ever. What Nespresso built a brand on was they realised that consumers identified with a crema. And before Nespresso came along, how do you create a coffee at home with crema? Like spend a load of money on an espresso machine and actually it was a branding agency that turned their fortunes around because that was designed for catering. And this branding agency came along and said, no, you should go straight at the end consumer and turn this into a lifestyle brand. So I was like, okay, the customer is actually more our customer than some of our customers. That's interesting. And then I was like, on paper, I'd actually watched a blog, or it was before he had a YouTube channel, James Hoffman, Jim7. He had a blog about capsules, and there was loads of myths, right? People, it's crazy to think it now, because you're like, it's just ground coffee in a pod. But at the time, people were like, is there an emulsifier in there? Like, how do you get the cremas so thick?
Oh, wow.
Because I when I was researching capsules, the crema on some of them is amazing. I brewed some before I went to bed, went to sleep, woke up, and the crema still covered the cup.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. But I made the assumption that, like a lot of things I'd seen in coffee, our assumption of whether something was good or bad was actually also to do with what coffee was being used rather than the technology itself.
Yeah.
So for example, you remember when it's like, oh, you know, batch brew's rubbish, you need to get a hand pour over. And then I was like looking at pour over, I was like, oh, they're a nightmare to brew well.
Oh, they're awful.
And then suddenly you go, oh, the reason most batch brews suck is because the company that uses a batch brew is like, I don't know, a conference center or a hotel. And, you know, it probably isn't made very well, but also the coffee is rubbish going into it. So then you see everyone going, actually, you can make a good coffee on a batch brew, but that's easy to find out, right? You just go buy yourself a batch brewer for, I don't know, how much are they? Depends on the brand.
Yeah, 100 quid.
30 to 150 quid.
Yeah, right? Whereas capsules, how do you go make a capsule?
Yeah.
So you're like, whoa, huge barrier to entry to even start seeing if you can make one taste good. And everything I've learned in all the research I've done, if you've got really good coffee, roasted nicely, ground decently with some good water, like you can get it to taste good.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the method is. If it doesn't taste good, you just need to figure something out about the method.
So how did the opal thing come about? Because obviously, you know, you'd been doing the pods for a little while. And
So
you'd obviously, how many years had you been producing
We've
pods?
been doing pods for 4 years.
So 4 years, yeah.
Because I think pods are a better specialty experience than home. So if you come into my cafe and you buy beans, you buy 3 bags of beans.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to taste the Colombian next to the Panama Geisha or the Ethiopian washed is if you are 1 in a million who wants to weigh out 3 sets, brew 3 coffees side by side and taste them. What the Nespresso system actually is, it encourages people to taste.
Yeah, it tastes different coffees.
Yeah,
Right. So like I always think there's a sacrifice. If you want to focus on brewing, you're not focusing as much on coffee origin. You're just not.
Well, that's I think.
That's interesting.
I was thinking that when you're saying that, it's like when we talk about specialty, so many people are like hung up on a cafe experience or an expensive grinder, but what it really is the
ingredient.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, like if you take an expensive coffee and put it in any method, like you were saying, that should stand out against.
Well, so what we did with capsules exactly was some people had tried it and they took their house coffee or the coffee they didn't like the most and put that in. And there's a market for that, but what I did was like took the most expensive coffees we could find, geishas, put them in there, and I think
just to see what
just to challenge that expectation. And we went to London Coffee Festival 16, and would serve them without telling anyone what they were. And people were like, oh, it's amazing, geisha, and he likes the pod. And that was the beginning of starting to challenge that. But it's been very challenging. We had supply chain problems because it was a little line and it got full real quick. And then you got an R&D battle because Nespresso, every machine they bring out, they were trying to make it work worse with everyone else's capsules. They don't want anyone else to use the system.
No, of course not.
You've got two things to do. You can make the capsule better, or you can have your own machine.
Yeah.
So
and that's where the Opal comes.
That's where the Opal came in. I was like, I can see why most brands would want to be able to say, hey, you know that Nespresso machine you've already got? Here's a capsule to go in it with better coffee. I get that. But I also would rather take control of the experience and know it was going to taste good, which is where the Opal came from. And that was actually a machine I found the bare bones of it have been designed, and me and there's a biotech guy I work with. We work on coffee together, and we saw this machine and we're like, oh, this is clever. If we just adapt this and change this, we can get great results. And yeah, we got in touch with the manufacturer and worked together on it, and so we both benefit. You know, they improved the machine, and that just had a world of difference for us that we could say, yeah, here's a machine, here's a pod, we know it's going to taste good.
Yeah.
Except we don't know what water they're going to use, which is the other project I've been working on. This is my shameless plug.
That's all right.
Which is peak water, yeah.
Yeah, the peak water. The peak water is a water jug where you can test your home water and then make it better with your product.
I think
maybe explain it better than what I just did. Because it was a crowdfunding project, wasn't it?
Yeah, man, don't do a Kickstarter. Whoa.
Really?
Yeah, people take real ownership of it and get really angry when you don't deliver. But I thought that, you're allowed to be late. The whole point of the Kickstarter originally is funding creatives midway through their journey, and you follow their journey.
Yeah.
It's not a pre-order. So obviously
Yeah, but surely you'd been selling coffee online and you know what people are like.
Yeah, man, but I can just say, here's a refund. No thanks, see you later. With a Kickstarter, that's it. They're tied in. On a Kickstarter, I messaged them the other day.
Do you know some of them? Do you know like a bunch of them just by name and you just?
It's not many. This is the thing. Like, if the statistical part of me sits back and goes, it's 8 people out of 1,234 backers.
Yeah.
But there's still 8 people we want to do this. So, but it's also like, I like that relationship with the customer. I'm like, this is what I'm doing. If you like it, cool. If not, fine. I've always been like in the shop. If you don't like the coffee, don't pay for it. But the weird thing about this is you're like, okay, I'll give you money back. No, I don't want my money back. I want
my product now.
I mean, one of the best one on there was I'd done an update about why our current delay. There's lots of delays. I mean, it's been a massive learning experience.
I don't know anyone that would be following us so much. I think I saw the Kickstarter, saw the idea, thought it was great, gave the money. It was nothing, was it? Like, how much was it?
Like, yeah, you got a deal.
How much was it?
You paid like 19 quid, I reckon, something like that, which is not enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
But anyway, are these 8 people the £19 people?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you see anything that costs that amount, and like it's a product that's going to be developed from the ground up.
Yeah.
So I was just like, cool, and it turned up at some point. I remember seeing emails. I didn't open them. I was like, it's going to be coming at some point.
And to be fair, I think exactly that was the majority.
He was cursing and swearing.
Was he?
For weeks.
Yeah.
Like, kicking shit.
Yeah,
Like,
Maxwell's coming today. Don't bring up the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But like, I can go online and just buy one now.
Yeah, you can buy it off us. You can buy it off another coffee roastery. You can buy it off a reseller. What I like about it is, you run your own coffee roastery, and naturally, then you're in competition with other coffee roasters. But what I like about this is, like, it makes everyone's coffee taste better. Like, it's a really cool project to do because I can work with lots of other coffee businesses on it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Nice one.
I'm going to have to go back to Bath.
Yeah.
Yep, no worries.
You are going to have to go back to Bath.
Yep.
We spoke for quite a long time. I wonder how well Will's going to cut this motherfucker. Look, if this got down to about 10 to 12 minutes.
I think we matched what the other interviews were. You said hour and a half, didn't you?
Yeah, I think Nick was about an hour and a half. Yeah, so obviously we went for a slightly longer format with this one. Maxwell's an incredibly intelligent and interesting guy. It's really good to have you in. Yeah, look, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you. If you lasted this long, we really appreciate it.
Smash the like button, subscribe, tell your friends, comment.
Yeah.
Bye.